All right, 50 minutes and we're out of here. So this man is driving down the road and his tire blows out. He has to pull over to the side, and he's right next to an insane asylum. He was just right across this ditch right there. So he gets out of the car, he goes back and looks at this flat, realizes he's gonna have to replace it. So he goes in the trunk and he gets his spare tire and he gets that out, and he gets the lug wrench and he takes those lugs off that tire and he puts them in the hubcap. That's what we used to do when we would change out a tire. Put those in there, and as he's going back to get something out of his trunk, he steps on the edge of that hubcap and it flips all of those lug nuts into the ditch. So he's standing there, he's going, oh my gosh, how could I do something so stupid? He says, how am I gonna get out of this? And there's a guy inside the fence at the insane asylum that's been watching what's going on. He says, hey, buddy, all you gotta do is go around to each of those other 3 wheels and take one lug nut off of each of those wheels. And with 3 lug nuts spaced on that tire, you can get to the tire shop. I was like, oh my gosh, he says, that's brilliant. But why are you in the insane asylum? Hey, they put me in here because I'm crazy, not because I'm stupid. Okay. So, professional ethics. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about professional ethics. And I discovered something in my research. There are considered to be 3 necessary features to single out by almost all who characterize professionals. There has to be extensive training is required to practice a profession. How many of us feel we had extensive training when we went through the insurance licensing and training? Pretty extensive? Yeah. Training involves a significant intellectual component. So that securities license that you took, did you feel there was an intellectual component that you had to overcome to get through that?
Absolutely.
That was the worst exam I've ever taken in my life.
Yeah.
I mean, wow. If you can pass that, you are a smart dude or gal. Holy smokes. Significant intellectual component. The trained ability provides an important service in society. So I've always felt that insurance is an important key element to how we do things here in America. You know, a lot of countries don't have this, but we're able to build skyscrapers and auto sales dealerships and, you know, pretty much anything you want to do. There's going to be insurance involved in the finances and the risk management of taking on that obligation. However, at the very bottom it says there is no generally accepted definition of the term profession exists. So you say, I'm a professional. Well, you can say that because there's no definition in the book that says that. Today we use really credentials. If you're a bookkeeper, that's different than a CPA. Or if you are an accountant that does audits, an auditor, that's a different accreditation that you're probably going to have. That experience I had with the FBI, our financial guy, he had so many credentials after his name, it was amazing. In fact, if you work in public education, if you want to be a principal, you want to be a vice principal, you want to get into financial stuff that's going on in there, there's all kinds of credentials that you have to have before they will let you. You can't just be a principal. I don't know that that's made it better, but it's just the practicality of how that is. So insurance is the same kind of situation. I would recommend to each of you your expertise can move you so much further in you as an agent, in your agency. If you just decided, okay, I'm going to become the foremost authority on cyber insurance in New Mexico, the world is your oyster. You could write your own ticket, speaking engagements, doing advisory work with different large organizations, and which would put you in the situation of selling insurance to them with that. I mean, when you become the expert, the recognized expert, the professional in a situation, expertise on insurance, it can really move you forward. I would highly recommend that you specialize in your career. I mean, being broad and broader has not really brought me the notoriety, the expertise, the credentials that being expert at something has. And you can monetize that in your career, is what I have found. Okay, but you're also going to have a professional responsibility. You know, I've done work for different law firms on occasion where I was the expert, the professional, speaking to the court. And what I came to find out is if you have more letters after your name, the court is going to hold you to a higher degree of responsibility. So if you're not monetizing some credentials that you've earned, don't put them on your card, because you do not want that judge looking down his nose at you saying, you know, you've held yourself out as an expert at this, as a professional, and you know, why did you allow this to go on? You know, so you're going to owe to your agency a professional responsibility, right? You're going to do things the right way. You're going to do things completely. You're going to handle business the way you should handle business, that people, and I'm not going to say you're going to get away from complaints or people saying, you know, I'm not happy with what went on. That's human nature. But the agency expects of you that you're going to handle things in a good and proper way. One of the reasons I got a college degree in political science, the insurance company my dad worked for required that. You weren't eligible to be hired by this big national company unless you had some kind of degree. They didn't care what it was, but if you didn't have one, you couldn't work for them. So he said, well, son, everybody else in our family had degrees, you need to get a degree in something. So, but that was my responsibility to my carrier, was that I had a college degree. We actually had a state director who came in and worked for a couple of years for that company here in New Mexico. They come to find out that he had a fake diploma. He had never graduated college, and they fired him on the spot. He had this diploma up on his wall, signed supposedly by the governor of California, and because it was California, and that's who supposedly had signed it, somebody with the company was looking at that thing and said, that guy wasn't governor of California. At that day and time, you know, that was Ronald Reagan, and it wasn't. And so they did some research and come to find out he had falsified his application to work for them. You have a responsibility, of course, an ethical responsibility to the state and the state of New Mexico to follow the laws and regulations. That's why we're here. You know, the insurance department in the state says you got to have 24 hours of continuing education and 3 hours of ethics, and 3 of those hours need to be in person. So you have complied with, here in about 30 minutes, the 3 hours and the in-person part of that requirement. To your carrier. So, have any of us ever burned an underwriter? The worst thing you can do in your career, probably, is burn an underwriter. Because that company will make that person the head of the department and then the head of the division. And your name is mud with them. I mean, that's an example. I went into that, and not intentionally, but I had that occur, and I didn't burn them on on purpose, but it did occur. But my responsibility to the carrier is to get them all the information, get them a complete application, get them truthful information. And sometimes it's painful. I've got a silly little business and they fix trailers. For some reason, that is almost impossible to find insurance for. If you take a camper trailer and you put a new stove in it, or you fix where they dinged the corners, nobody wants it. And the carrier has sent me, on occasion, 3 different supplementals for this tiny little business. I'm going to tell you, don't look at doing a bunch of insurance for trailer repair, okay? It will wear you out, and you will be so angry and unhappy that nobody's going to want to be around you. So, but my responsibility to the carrier is to go back out to the owner, ask these silly questions, because he said, yeah, on occasion I'll weld something. Oh, you wouldn't consider welding something. If you weld something, we need to know how big the tanks are and how they're secured and how. It's like, oh my goodness gracious. But he does, so we gathered up the information for him. To the client, and I've always felt my primary responsibility is to do what's right and honest for the individual. I will, on occasion, I'll look at an account. The agent has done a great job of providing the insurance. They're with a competitive carrier. It's kind of like, why do you want to move? They're obviously doing a good job for you. You've got a competitive price. Is there an issue? And leave it alone. And on more than one occasion, because I did that, that agent retired, or they quit, or whatever, and all of a sudden this guy's calling me out of the blue saying, you were honest with me. You gave me a good, honest answer, and now that agent is no longer in the picture. I would love to have you take care of my insurance. And it's no longer price. It's about, they want me to do my job. And it's like, there's no better referral than having somebody say, you did a great job, you told me the truth, and I'm back. And it's like, okay. Honest. We were talking about used cars and used car salesmen earlier. So I read an article, and it said the reason we hate used car salesmen is because they have all the information. Their level of information is up here. As we walk in and try to buy a car, our information level is here. We don't know the overall reputation of the manufacturer, of this model, of has it been wrecked, all that kind of stuff. So we always feel like they're trying to get one over on us, or used to. And then lo and behold, CarMax and Carvana come out and they say, the price is this, here's the Carfax for being wrecked or not, and if anything happens in 90 days, we'll fix it for you, repair it for you. No question, just bring it in, and we've got a repair shop right. And it's like all the used car places up and down Lomas are gone. In the dead of night, they disappeared. There are some independents left, but in general, being honest and giving all the information took over the used car sales world in that situation. Commissions. As I was saying, I don't like fighting over I'm a little bit cheaper type of situation. This quote from Aristotle: a life of money making is one undertaken under compulsion, being forced to do it. And wealth is evidently not the good we are seeking, for it is merely useful and for the sake of something else. I would highly encourage you in your career, look at why you're doing it. Is it fulfilling you? If it's not, you need to find another profession. Part of the reason you only make as much money as you make is because you're not happy. You should be participating in a career that fulfills you. And if not, be looking. Because there's lots, I mean, even staying in the insurance industry, all kinds of things you could do. I often tell that to new agents and say, if you're not happy producing, there are other things and places you can go. We had a young lady working in our office, and honest to goodness, she's great. And one of the carriers who was busy was talking to her about her career and stuff, and they ended up hiring her with our permission to go on, because we wanted what was best for her too. But she is now working for an insurance company as an employee for them rather than on the underwriting side of our agency. They're happy, she's happy. We lost, a valuable asset, but it happens. That kind of thing goes on. I never regret recommending to somebody to move on. If this isn't your place and this isn't where you're happy and where you're doing good stuff, it's okay. You're going to be happier somewhere else. Or eventually it's going to fall apart. And that's the worst case scenario, is when somebody really falls apart or blows up. I had a friend who owned a big agency in California, and the personality profiles that some companies make you go through? So he had been recommended, you need to do these with everybody, not just the new people coming in, but everybody on your staff. And he had a friend that he had hired, and he had just instituted this personality profile, and they put him through it. And the personality profile said, this guy is volcanic. He eventually is gonna run screaming into the night or something. And he said, I've known this guy my whole life. He grew up on the same block with me. He's a friend. And about 6 months later, he gets a call from his office, the head of the office, and he says, it happened. He has your underwriting supervisor pinned down over a desk, and he's threatening to kill him. And he said, I became a believer in these personality profiles. He said it was very good at indicating this guy very unhappy with what he was doing. I love that we work for commissions. How much you make is dependent on how hard you work. It does not matter what color you are, what sex you are, what any of that stuff. If you want to make a better living, all you got to do is work harder or work smarter, and you can do really well at this. I owned an agency for 30 years, and I was at a baseball game. My son was playing baseball, and I sat down next to, I didn't know it, a producer for one of the large agencies here in Albuquerque. And I says, how's it going? He says, I love life. He says, I've got 2 kids going to Ivy League schools on the East Coast. I own a huge house up in the Northeast Heights. He said, and I'm driving, a Mercedes. He says, what could be better than that? And I don't have to worry about employees or payroll or any of that kind of stuff. He says, the life of a producer is pretty good. And at that point, I was stressed out about these 13 employees I had and who was going to come to work and not go to work and all that kind of stuff, and thought, maybe I ought to reconsider where exactly I am and what exactly I'm doing. It was another 5 years before I sold my agency, but it was one of those aha moments that it happened. Prestige. Got this guy in a suit. I actually, put on a suit for you guys this morning. So, I love the shoes. The now we can wear shoes that are comfortable all day long at men. And women too, I'm sure. It has changed since COVID that you can wear, really nice tennis shoes along with a suit or slacks at least. Boy, that is just a blessing. One of the few blessings that came out of COVID, besides remote work, is the styles have really changed. Influence. This can be a bugaboo for people. They care more about who they're hanging out with rather than who they really are. And when I sense that about somebody, I'm probably going to move away from you. I get easily tired of people that are so full of themselves and who they hang out with, and that's what's really important to them. Affluence. I said I do appreciate commission and what it is that we can do with our life. Some of those yachts, when I go to the different cities that have a port, I like to go down there and check out the boats. I don't do boats. I've got bad boat karma. Been out in the middle of lakes on a couple of occasions when the motor just decided, yeah, we're not running anymore for you, Turpen, and have to paddle or signal somebody in distress and have them tow you back to wherever somebody can fix your boat. But I love the yachts. If you ever get down to the Bahamas, there are some yachts down there that are truly impressive with the helicopter pads and they've got a elevator in the back that lowers so they can get their jet skis out of there, and they're very cool stuff. Legality and illegality. What's the difference between accidental obedience or negligent obedience? I want to warn you about what we refer to as a material misrepresentation, which is different from just a misrepresentation. Well, I checked a box saying that they were a non-smoker, but I never asked. That's probably a accidental disobedience, or it's not really but it could be considered a material misrepresentation. When you're underwriting a life insurance or health insurance application, it's so important that you get the accurate information, the truthful information that goes into the underwriter. Because when that goes bad, like somebody passes on within the first 2 years of a life contract, they're going to examine every piece that went through your hands and they looked at. So that needs to be pristine. Same thing on your health insurance applications, right? Make sure that information is complete and the truthful whole story of that individual, because they're going to use that health insurance. If they use the life insurance, there's another situation. I had a client, became a new client. They bought $500,000 of life insurance on themselves and their wife, and within the first 2 years, his wife died, and the insurance company, this big national life insurance company, said, not going to pay. your wife was drunk and nobody said it. And he went through that life insurance application, and the question was, have you ever had a medical professional diagnose that you are over imbibing or drinking more to excess? Have you ever been institutionalized for being an alcoholic or anything? Those were the questions, and she hadn't. But that insurance company refused to pay because all of her friends, the people around them, or people they investigated her with, said, man, did she drink a lot? And they refused. They ultimately paid, but it took a couple of years and attorneys to get this big national company to pay that. So you run into situations where you realize how destructive this can be for somebody's life and livelihood when they run into a situation that could have very easily been better if that application had been more professionally addressed or something like that. What you want to avoid at all costs is a material misrepresentation to the insurance company of whatever you're presenting. That you can get a better rate if they're further away from the coast than they actually are, or they're outside of a wildfire zone, or they're pretty hard to fudge on anymore because they have satellite imagery and all of that kind of stuff. To communicate with a submarine at a certain depth, up to a certain depth, we can send messages that way, and we patented that. It's like, wow, that's very cool stuff. I like dealing with the engineers at San Diego. Sometimes you run into really cool stuff. And so I sent this back over to the underwriter, who also happened to be a new underwriter. She says, well, that sounds like communications technology. She says, let's just write you up like you're kind of like a phone company or something like that. I said, okay. And then at some point, the head of underwriting gets a hold of this thing and they freak out. They're worried that somehow this message is going to sink a submarine, and the insurance company is going to be holding the bag for a submarine going down in our fleet. And it's like, underwriters are not normal people. I don't know. I'm just going to say they live in a different world than I do. But seriously, you think that's a risk? That's and man, I had to fly out to the Los Angeles and sit down with the underwriter and convince him, look, I gave you complete disclosure. I told you everything that was going on with this risk. If you don't like it, let's get off it. I don't know what to tell you besides that, but I had given total and complete information to them. The fact that they were unhappy because they were on this risk, okay, it does happen. Here's another one. I inherited an account, and what this guy did was soil sampling. Now there's all kinds of soil sampling that goes on out in the world. If you've got an orchard, you're probably going to want a soil sample on occasion to find out the pH levels and what kind of fertilizer you're using, or if you've got an infestation of something on your farm or something, you're going to want soil sampling to figure out what I need to do and what's up. So that's pretty mundane, right? Soil sampling. Well, come to find out, this account, what he would do is he would go out on White Sands Missile Range and he would get soil samples, and he would find soil samples that had residue from missiles. And then he would plot from these soil samples where that missile was going, and he would find it and dig it up and destroy the missile or the bomb that was laying out there on White Sands. That's not soil sampling. That's a lot, and the insurance company, I inherited this guy, I didn't have anything to do with it. That was not complete information. That was not complete disclosure from the agent that had written that account. And very cool, but the insurance company, the cost of that thing went from $1,200 to about $40,000 for them. But had to have insurance to get on White Sands Missile Range, and that cleared up this situation. Had the underwriter been given complete disclosure of what was going on there, they probably never would have written it, but it would have been at least $40,000, or in today's day and time, this was at least 10 years ago, would be a lot more. Okay, so those are a couple of examples why we've got to give complete and full disclosure of everything that we're giving to our carrier to make sure that the insurance will perform when they come in need of that. I mean, I write the insurance for a potential claim. If there's no way that that's going to happen, that this claim is going to occur, I'm going to try to recommend they don't buy it. But I write a policy that when the claim occurs, I want the insurance company to perform. I want them to pay the full amount to get them back in the condition they were before the claim occurred. That's the purpose. That's why we're here. You know, I'm often asked, why should we buy the insurance from a certain company? And I always say, you want to buy insurance from the company that pays claims the best. It's worth a little bit more to get that insurance when you know they're going to pay the claim. That's what we do. That's who we are. So I will recommend and push sometimes maybe a little higher rate, but that company has an A+ experience on paying their claims. They have a local adjuster who lives here, who knows the environment, and who will go out and take care of that claim for you. That's the type of service I want to provide to somebody, and the type of claims experience I want them to have, if possible. And sometimes they just go for, it's cheap. It's like, oh, okay. But don't come to me crying when you realize that they're gonna fight you, to pay that claim on that situation. So, let me see what else. We're almost there, guys. I had a professional referral from my uncle. My uncle was an attorney here in town, and one of his most wealthy clients, he said he needs some help with his personal insurance. Could you talk to him? And I was a new agent. I was, still wet behind the ears. And I went to talk to this gentleman, and he gave me copies of his policies, and I went and got the quotes, and I went back to see him and went through it, and lo and behold, I was same cost or a little cheaper. And I said, I recommend you buy this insurance from me. He says, you know what? He says, I've become a very wealthy man by making good decisions throughout my life. He said, you're brand new. He said, I can't afford for you to make a mistake on my assets and all of the things that I own and I've acquired over my lifetime. He said, I want you to, if you're still in this business in 5 years, come and talk to me. He says, I will write everything I've got with you. He said, but I'm not going to buy insurance from somebody who's only been in the business for 2 years. It's like, oh my gosh, you talk about slapping somebody in the face. That hurt. But 5 years later, I was still in the business. I went and saw that guy, and I wrote every policy that he had. So sometimes you're going to hear stuff, you know, weigh it for what it's worth. You know, it may help you in the long run, who you are and what kind of insurance agent and agency you have and you work for. I had another experience where I walked into, it was a Coca-Cola bottler, and the CFO, I said, why are we meeting? And he said, you know, when I went to college and got my accounting degree and that kind of stuff, they recommended that every so often the company you're working with bid their insurance and get some alternatives to what they're paying. And he said, I thought it was a good idea. Now the owner said, don't do it. I love the guy we're with because he brings me football tickets and basketball tickets, and he, you know, takes care of all kinds of extra expenses for us, just all kinds of stuff. When he comes, he brings a basket of goodies. And I told the CFO, I said, I'll be half of what they're charging you. And we just laughed about it. I was 40% of what they were paying with as good or better insurance company. So be aware that if somebody's paying more or they're getting services that are really not part of the deal, there's probably something going on there that they would be better off with you than with this agent carrier. I had that same kind of thing with auto repair. They own 6 shops here in Albuquerque, and they had never looked at a competing insurance company. It's like, well, I know I can give you better service, I think. You know, I know I can, and I think I can be much more competitive on what you're paying. Sure enough, they got all kinds of goodies from their agent and agency, and that's an undue influence as to how you're holding that account and taking care of them is a bad, unethical thing to bump into. Okay, so unexploded ordnance was fun. So I've been in Rotary for over 30 years now. It's a service group, no religion, no politics. We just do service in the community. They stand on, this is their 4-way test of items. First thing to determine is what you're dealing, is it the truth or is somebody lying? Is it fair to all those that are concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships, your decision out of this situation? And then fourth, will it be beneficial to everyone concerned? If you bump into a really tough ethical decision, I have on occasion myself used this, you know, put it through the process and see what you come out with. See if you don't see some way you can answer these and then move forward with a good decision. This was a businessman back, you know, more than 50 years ago. His business was failing, and he sat down and came up with this. And he said, I want everybody who works for me to run their decisions through this and make good decisions using this four-way test of things we think, say, or do in this business. And his business blossomed. It took off. There's a not understood principle in business underlying that when you do good things, when you do the right things, your business will prosper, you will prosper, things will get better. That's my own belief. An ethical or moral foundation. One must learn and practice an ethical virtue and professional self-awareness as part of their second nature. Is a quote I love that. I'm hopeful that you will take this to mind and learn to practice your ethics and morals more frequently. Take it to heart. I think it will do wonderful things for you and for the people around you. Nope. So that's all of my PowerPoint. I've got about 5 more minutes on there. So your tests and test questions. Rachel, do you have the answer sheet? Speed my life up if I've got an answer sheet I can work with. So I'll quickly go through those. Let me real quick go through these questions. Boy, I'm not used to standing up for 3 hours. Okay, question number 1. Which of the following best describes the difference between ethics and law? What do we got? It's C. Okay. Ethics go beyond legal requirements. Which organization created model regulations on unfair trade practices in insurance? That is B. That's the NAIC. Number 3, what is twisting in an insurance sales? B. That was one of your test questions on when you got licensed. That's B. That's a misrepresenting a policy to induce replacement. You see that a lot. Well, it happens in all kinds of insurance, not just life insurance or health insurance. Well, don't get much of that in health anymore. You got like 3 choices, take A, B, or C. That's all you had. An insurance agent sells a product that is not suitable for the client but provides a higher commission. This is an example of, that's B again, a conflict of interest. I had a gal and I sat down and went through their life insurance years ago, and they had bought a very expensive whole life policy for she and their 3 children for $50,000 of coverage. And I looked at that and I thought, you've got a mortgage for $250,000, you've got these 3 kids, and you bought a $50,000. It was one of the big life insurance companies. And I thought, man, that's just rotten. And I was in the office, several months later, cleaning up some paperwork when she called. She said, how much life insurance did we buy from you? I said, you didn't buy any. You said you couldn't afford it because you had this $50,000 from whoever. She said, she just started crying. She said, my husband died last night, and that's all we've got. It's like, I told you. It's not a comfortable thing to tell people, I told you that was a really bad idea. You could talk into something that isn't the best for you and your family. I mean, they could have bought, I don't know, $500,000 or more of term insurance for that same price. Well, okay. Which of the following is considered an unfair claim settlement practice? Number 5 is B again. Boy, if you just went through and did B on all these questions, you would have done just fine. That's deliberately delaying claim payments. There are state statutes. If you think an insurance company is dragging something out when they shouldn't be, you can check with the insurance division and say, how long they really got to pay this thing off, and they'll tell you it's 30 days or it was 2 weeks or whatever. Which ethical approach emphasizes doing what creates the greatest good for the greatest number? Number 6 is B again. 7, a producer rebating part of their commission to a customer to close a sale is 7. C. We had a company come into New Mexico years ago, about 10 years ago, and he was offering on work comp upfront dividends, which are illegal as hell. But he was telling the insured and giving to the insured a product where if they signed up for a $200,000 work comp policy, he'd give them a $40,000 upfront check. And he wrote a bunch of insurance in New Mexico, several of which were clients of mine. And I went to the insurance commissioner and said, what the hell? So they investigated this and came up, yep, sure enough, that's what's going on. It's illegal. We're finding the agency that hired. He didn't even have a license to sell insurance in New Mexico. He was out of Florida. And they find, and it took me 2 years to get my clients back that he took away. But I can tell you, when somebody offers you something for free that nobody else is offering, I couldn't get my clients to complain. Why would they complain? Guy just gave me a $40,000 check. So there are occasions when you want to call and talk to Matt, talk to Rachel, or they'll forward you on to the insurance division if that's the appropriate way to address that situation. Number 8, which duty requires insurance to act in the best interest of the clients? That's A. It's a fiduciary duty. And 9, a misrepresentation in insurance sales usually involves B, intentionally misleading a client. 10, a claims adjuster denies a claim based on technical exclusions the client was not aware of. This raises what ethical question? Number 10 is C. We're out of time. You guys want the rest of the answers? Okay. Number 11 is D. 12 is B. 13 is C. 14 is C, and 15 is B. So, in closing, I really appreciate that you took the time to come and in person talk about this subject. I don't think there's anything more important to you in your career and what you're going to be able to do as agents. I appreciate very much that the Independent Agents Association decided let's do this and let's do it in person. Talk with your cohorts out there and tell them it was okay. It was, maybe you smiled a little, laughed a little, and you got that in-person stuff done. Matt, you got anything else you want to say before we?
No. First, I would just, on behalf of the association, like to thank you for coming and doing this for us.